All right, well, OTB Sports in partnership with Science Week. Science Week helping us explore the infinite possibilities science offers and the role of science in delivering solutions that support our future opportunities and challenges. It's taking place from the 13th to 20th of November, and you can find out how you can get involved by visiting scienceweek.ie. We're going to get into one of the topics now that I know Science Week are covering quite heavily across the next couple of weeks and while. It's the area of mental health. And I guess accelerating efforts around mental health and infectious diseases and improving the quality of life, improving the treatment for mental health issues as well. And joining me to discuss her journey on the mental health frame as well is someone who's a bit of a sporting all-rounder, a familiar face to off-the-ball viewers, Hannah Tyrrell, Irish Rugby international, Sevens international, Dublin footballer. She's played soccer in the Women's National League as well. Hannah, how are you keeping?
Hi Shane, I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Not so bad, keeping well. Good to have you on. And all rounder, I think, is a good way to describe you, because if there's a sport that someone has heard of, there's a chance that you've played at national or international levels, such as your proficiency.
Yeah, look, I've just been very lucky, I suppose, in my career to have got to play with some incredible teams and some incredible teammates. And I just love sports. It's been a big part of my life, and I'm very grateful that I've been involved in what I have been in my career so far.
For sure, 100%. Hannah, I suppose we wanted to talk to yourself about your own mental health journey, and I know it's a difficult thing to talk about, but when you did come out and talk about it, it certainly, I know, did good things in terms of you being a role model, allowing yourself to open up, and maybe other people kind of saw that as well. Maybe tell us a little bit about your own journey and your decision to kind of come out and I guess express that journey publicly.
Yeah, I suppose from a young teenager, I was always into sport and always playing sport and had a great family life. But I suppose I always had some high standards for myself that, looking back now, were a little bit too high and weren't really achievable. And I started to have a lot of doubts about myself and felt like I wasn't good enough in many aspects of my life. And I started to maybe try and change my appearance. I thought that might, be a life-changing thing for me, in that if I was skinnier, I might play better on the pitch, I might be prettier, people might like me better. And I had all these unrealistic ideas in my head, and I had a very negative view of myself. And I started restricting my food intake, and one thing led to another, and I ended up basically having an eating disorder in the form of bulimia, where I would try and restrict my food, but then I would binge and eat a lot at one time, and then I would make myself sick afterwards because of that guilt and shame. I kind of got stuck in a cycle of that, feeling really crappy, so comfort eating, and then making myself sick and feeling really crappy about that afterwards. And I also began to self-harm around the same time. And again, for me, self-harm was like a punishment for not being good enough. As I said, I had all these high standards and expectations for myself, but they weren't realistic and they weren't achievable. So I was constantly a failure in my eyes. And, the self-harm and the idea and urge to self-harm would not go away until I did. And afterwards, I would have very brief relief or respite. But unfortunately, that feeling of hatred and shame and repulsiveness would return. And I got stuck in that cycle of my eating disorder and my self-harm. And I was very young and vulnerable. I was only 12 or 13, and I didn't really realize what I was doing. I just knew that it wasn't something I should have been doing. And I knew that people would maybe think of me differently had they known I was doing it. So I kept it to myself, and I put on this facade and this mask to the outside world that everything was great. My life was great and I was very happy. And it certainly looked that way with sport and school and family life, but deep down, I just had this constant negative thoughts about myself, and I was physically and emotionally hurting myself. And that continued for a number of years, progressively getting worse. Nobody any wiser to it. I was so good at putting on that mask that people didn't realize what I was struggling with, and I was really afraid to come out in case people. The stigma around mental health, and in case people thought I was crazy and I was a weirdo and this, that, and the other. But another big fear was that I was afraid that nobody would be able to help, or that nobody would understand. And when I was going through it, there wasn't a huge amount out there about mental health. There wasn't a well-being week. There wasn't mental health awareness day, or if there was, it wasn't very well promoted. And I suppose the reason I'm very happy and willing to speak about my journey now that I've come through it all is because I don't want anybody else to feel like that. And I want to make it easier for people to reach out and ask for help and not have to struggle the way I did, because we all go through our challenges, you know, throughout our life, and it affects some more than others, but there is always help out there. And I suppose I'm just trying to remove that stigma and help people reach out and get the help that they need and the help that they deserve.
And I suppose that help that you speak about, like the science and research improvements, and that's one thing that's being spoken about this Science Week, is that the improvements have been tremendous in those areas. And look, it's easy for us to say that, but how did you find, the treatment for mental health services, and how have you noticed improvements, even in the last 10, 20 years in Ireland, that people maybe feel more comfortable in reaching out and going to a professional?
Yeah, look, absolutely. There's so many charities and institutions and counselors out there. You know, for me, I was lucky around the time that people did actually start to find out that I was struggling with my self-harm and my eating disorder. Pieta House wasn't long open, you know, and now they're a major charity that helps so many families around Ireland. But back then they were very, very small. So it's great to see like they've expanded and opened up way more centres across the country. You know, which is great to see. With so many brilliant charities out there, the likes of Jigsaw have their One Good Adult program, and even like with the rugby, the RPI had the Tackle Your Feelings campaign. So those guys, having them out there and trying to spread the word and show people that it doesn't matter who you are, you know, we all can be affected by this. I suppose there's still work to be done if you look at our actual health system and the waiting list you see for people struggling with their mental health and stuff. But you know, we'll have a long way to go on that, and I really hope it can improve quickly to get people what they need. But I suppose I ended up in a St. Patrick's, which was a mental health institution when I was a young teenager, 18 or 19. And when I was there, they didn't have an adolescent ward or anything like that. And so I was stuck in an adult ward, which was fine. But nowadays there's younger and younger people being admitted into hospital, and thankfully now they've developed and they have an adolescent ward. So we do see things coming along. It's just maybe not quite as quick as we would like. And it, like, if you're looking at the community out there, people are more open, or people are opening up a little bit more and more willing to talk about it and help others who are out there, which is great to see. So attitudes are changing. We just still have a way to go in all aspects.
And as you say, like it is a lot more younger people kind of presenting with these difficulties. And like one of the things, I guess, for this generation is social media. And look, we know that social platforms can have a huge impact, a negative impact as well on people's mental health. Like, do you feel, even from talking to young people or even younger players, like that is something that the younger generation are having to deal with a little bit more, that social media adds a little bit of pressure as well?
Absolutely, there's massive pressure there. You know, social media has its positives, obviously, and it has its upsides. And you know, people can use it to share these ideas and stories about mental health and get across the help that's out there. But you also have the negative side of things, so the pressure to look good, and the pressure to act and perform a certain way to fit in. And you know, particularly with students, I'm a secondary school teacher, like I'm in school now, and like you see it everywhere, like students coming in and massive pressure to look good and to not stand out. And that then for some people goes a lot deeper than that, and they end up with massive anxiety. You end up with bullying then as well with people. You end up with school refusal, purely because they have that anxiety about how they look and how they are in society. And you know, that's something that we really need to work on. So like, I'd be a huge advocate of social media for all the good that it does, but I'm very, very aware of the negatives there and the pressure that is on young students these days.
And that was probably something even during COVID as well, that, you know, a lot of young people didn't have the outlet of school or socializing and that sort of thing. And that, I suppose, that has a massive impact as well.
Yeah, look, COVID was tough for everybody. And, you know, particularly when you're restricted in your access of where you were allowed to go in the really tough times there. And for me, like, you know, sport and exercise has always been a defining factor in my mood. And I'm always been one to, if I'm not feeling great, to get out for a walk or do a bit of exercise and get those endorphins flowing. But a lot of people didn't have those opportunities, and a lot of people were isolated, and you know, whether physically because they had COVID or they were at risk of contracting it, or you know, emotionally in that because they weren't able to connect with friends as much, and that would have pushed a lot of people onto social media and online, which again has its negatives. But thankfully we're coming out of COVID, people can interact with their friends more, they can get back playing their sports and stuff like that. But it was definitely a tough time for many, myself included.
How important was sport for you in kind of your road to recovery? I know it was, I suppose when your story came out first, was it by choice that you opened up? Was it just that you felt like you had to kind of make more people aware and to open up on your own journey?
It was kind of a mix. I never really planned to talk about it, but after we won the Six Nations in 2015, I was being interviewed by a journalist for a book she was writing, and she kind of asked why I had a bit of a gap in my career, or let's say, or my personal journey. And I basically just said to her that I had been in a mental institution and that I was struggling with my mental health during that time. And she asked, was it okay to publish? And an article came out and a section in the book came out about it. And then from there, I suppose I had a lot of interest in sharing my story, and I'm very happy to do that. So I never actually thought I would, but you know, it benefits so many people, because it allows them to realize that it doesn't matter who you are, we can all be struggling with this, but also, you know, that there are so many people out there that are struggling with it, because you feel so alone, and mental health can be so debilitating and so isolating, you know. And once you realize that there's other people out there that can help and that do understand, it makes it so much easier to actually reach out and get that recovery. And for me, you know, it took me a very long time to reach out and ask for help, and I genuinely thought that there wouldn't be a support network there for me because of the negative feelings I had for myself. But I couldn't have been more wrong. And all my friends and family and my teammates were so supportive and did everything they could. And, you know, I'm so grateful, because many of those friends were friends I made through sport. And, you know, those friendships, you know, they're still there today. And I don't know where I'd be without them, you know. And even just sport itself was an hour or two for me where I could get out and forget about all the negative thoughts in my head and just go and do something that I loved, you know. And I wasn't doing it for to lose weight or, you know, burn calories. I was doing it because I loved it and I really enjoyed it.
And that's probably one of the important things as well, to kind of, you know, when you're struggling, I guess, to latch on to those things that you love and enjoy doing. Like, was it a surprise to you at the time, because you were probably in a headspace that you didn't realize all the support that was there? But when you did eventually open up and get all that love from your teammates, that must have been, I guess, a weight off your shoulders.
Absolutely. Like, and it was so heartwarming for me, because I genuinely, like, and looking back now, I was silly because they've always been great friends and family for me. And I, like, deep down, I probably should have known that they would support me, but my head had been so warped by all those negative emotions and feelings I had. I genuinely was so shocked when I had such an outpouring of support. You know, I had teammates visiting me in hospital. My mom and dad visited every single day without fail. I had old school teachers dropping in, you know, and it really showed me the impact I had on people, and, you know, that I wouldn't be forgotten and that I wasn't a nobody, and that, you know, I did matter. But it took me a long time to realize that, you know, and it had to come from me. I had to realize that I did matter, I did care, you know, I did deserve to be happy. But yeah, it was friends and family and sport that made me eventually realize that.
Finally, Hannah, what would you say to young people, or people in general out there listening, maybe, or watching this today, who are maybe struggling, going through their own mental health difficulties, and maybe feel that there is no way out?
Well, first thing I would say is, obviously, like, we all feel like that, and that you're not alone in how you are feeling, but also that there's always someone out there willing to help, whether you know them right now or not. There are so many support networks and services out there. Would you be surprised, you know, how much your friends and family want to do everything they can to help you? So I would say to them to reach out and find one person they're willing to, you know, talk to and open up about. And just that first step is so hard to do, but once it's done, you will feel so much better. And that's the first step. You know, you're not going to feel better overnight, you know, but you can take that first step on that journey to recovery. And as I said, there's always help out there. There's always someone who will understand and who is willing to listen. And that's the start you need.
Listen, Hannah, you've been great with your time, and really appreciate you sharing your story with us for Science Week. And listen, delighted you're doing so well, and really appreciate you coming on and sharing all those stories with us.
No worries. Thanks a million, Shane.
Hi, I'm Shane O'Mara, and I'm Professor of Experimental Brain Research at Trinity College Dublin.
Brilliant stuff. Well, Shane, this area of mental health.
I'm an investigator in the Institute and a member of the School of Psychology.
Brilliant. Sorry to interrupt you. Shane, I suppose this area of mental health is one we've dived into on Science Week, and the guys at Science Week have decided to delve into it further. But you've spoken before, for example, about how walking, something as simple as walking, can improve your brain health as well as your physical health.
Yeah, so I think there's an important message, which I'll give you a slogan to remember, which is that movement is medicine. And we have bodies and brains that are getting around in the world. And every study that we have access to consistently shows that people who are active, who get out and about, enjoy a better state of well-being than people who veg out on the couch. Now, that's not to say that people who are vegging out on the couch maybe don't have a good reason for doing that. But getting up and getting some sort of movement going, simple way to give yourself a boost in how you feel.
How important is it that we, I suppose, develop and constantly evolve these mental health practices in Ireland? Like, can we learn from countries that maybe, in your opinion, do it well?
I don't think a particular country is doing anything well. I think we're all in kind of roughly the same kind of zone when you look across different countries have different approaches, and it's hard to point to one and say, well, actually what we think they're doing in, I don't know, say Finland or somewhere is what we should be doing here. I think every country is running up against the same kinds of constraints. There aren't enough well-qualified mental health practitioners. There's a stigma around the idea of maintaining one's own mental health. There's a lack of public messaging to do with simple things that can improve your mental health. Now, we've mentioned movement already, but the one that I really want to emphasize also is social connection, that humans are hyper-social beings. We shouldn't think of ourselves just as being social animals. We should really think of ourselves as being hyper-social animals. And we need contact with other people. Contact through a screen is fine, but what we actually need is the three-dimensional presence of another person in their full size that we can talk and laugh and have all the normal human connections with. And this is where I think social media actually, for all the troubles that they cause or can cause, can be very useful. Because, on various platforms, there are things like walking groups. There are the men's shed groups. There's lots and lots of other groups where people can just find out some information about how they can get and get active doing things with other people.
I suppose COVID taught us that as well, Shane, that these social interactions are massively, massively important.
Yeah, and I think one of the awful lessons from COVID, particularly for development has been the big spike in anxiety levels that's been experienced in that group right across the world. And we don't have a good policy response to it. I think, especially in the teenage years, having peers, interacting with peers is a really important thing. It's required as a kind of a normal part of your social development. 2 years were knocked off that. And, you can see when you look at the data across the world, it's had a big impact on children's learning, but I think it's also had, and adolescents learning, also had an impact on each other. And, you see them sort of getting back together again. It's almost as if they're having to relearn these things afresh. I think COVID has brought all sorts of terrible lessons for us. And one of them is that interruption in human connection is really something we need to focus on.
Finally, Shane, social platforms. We know that they have a huge impact on our mental health as well. And I'm sure there's scientific evidence and research to back this up, but it's clearly an area that we need to.
Yeah, so I actually, it'd be interesting to have Yeah, so the social platforms are, there's obviously a whole wide variety of them, and we're engaging in this amazing uncontrolled experiment where they're concerned. And, you have everything from Facebook to TikTok to Twitter and the great phrase doom scrolling. There's every sort of platform out there. Now, the question is, on a platform or the mere available necessarily a bad thing? So the literature is actually kind of interesting on this. So there's a paper which has just come out in the American Economic Review. And what they've done in this paper is look at the staggered introduction of Facebook across US colleges. And I'll quote from the paper. It says, "We find the rollout of Facebook at a college had a negative impact on student mental health. It increased the likelihood with which students reported experience academic impairments to performance due to poor mental health." And they think it's got something to do with social comparisons. Now, that's a US paper. With the other hand, I think there's plenty of evidence that people have found access to platforms like Facebook actually great, because it's reestablished a sense of connection with people that, you might have lost contact with. So I think, it's kind of a mixed bag here. And then we're moving into a kind of an era, which I think is really interesting, where mental health services are being delivered through platforms. So there are quite a few of these available now. Some good, some not so good, some unregulated. So my kind of take would be that these social media platforms are here. They're not going away. And they, like any technology, they can be good and they can be bad, depending on the use that you put them to. As in all things in life, moderation is a good thing.